Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Russian drone attacks struck residential areas in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, injuring 32 people. Overnight strikes sparked fires, forcing residents to flee, and one drone hit near a medical facility. Emergency services have battled blazes and assisted those affected. President Trump has said that ABC's broadcasting licenses should be taken away after disagreeing with a reporter's question on the Jeffrey Epstein political scandal. He has praised FCC Chair Brendan Carr to review the licenses. US President Donald Trump has said that leaders from every major country will join a Gaza Board of Peace. The UN approved a US-backed plan to end the conflict, authorize an international force, and oversee reconstruction. Meanwhile, Hamas says it will not disarm, and references to Palestinian statehood have sparked controversy in Israel. President Trump has praised Syria's tremendous progress under President Ahmed al-Sharaa. He has said that lifting U.S. sanctions with support from Saudi Arabia and Turkey gives Syria a chance to recover and rebuild regional ties. The UAE has expressed solidarity with India after a bus carrying Umrah pilgrims collided with an oil tanker near Medina, killing at least 45 Indian pilgrims and injuring others this week. A Telangana delegation led by Minister Muhammad Azharuddin has arrived in Saudi Arabia to support families, coordinate with authorities, and implement relief measures. US President Donald Trump has said that the United States and Iran will probably end up making a deal. Trump has offered no timeline but suggested both sides may eventually return to the negotiating table amid ongoing tensions over Iran's nuclear program. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told President Vladimir Putin while visiting the Kremlin that China is determined to pursue mutually beneficial cooperation with Russia, as both sides praised their comprehensive strategic partnership and recent high-level meetings between their presidents, as both countries vowed to continue cooperation. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told Mongolian Prime Minister Gombojav Zandan Shatar that China is ready to expand trade, boost cooperation, and align development strategies to strengthen their comprehensive strategic partnership, while Mongolia has also reaffirmed its One China policy, praised China's support, and vowed to deepen cooperation. Now we start with Russia and Ukraine. Russian drone attacks have hit residential areas in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, injuring 32 people, including 2 children. The overnight strike targeted the Slobidsky, Osnovyansky, and Nemyslyansky districts, sparking fires that forced dozens of residents to flee. Separately, 6 of the injured have been hospitalized, and 1 drone struck near a medical facility, injuring a doctor and damaging nearby vehicles. Ukraine's emergency services shows firefighters battling the blaze and rescuers helping residents to safety. Kharkiv is just 30 kilometers from the Russian border and has near daily missile and drone attacks since the war began. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this, what is your analysis on the front lines of the ongoing Ukraine and Russia war? And also, I wanted to know your take on why Zelensky only thinking to join Turkey talks while Putin or Russia doesn't show up?
Yes. First of all, we have another very serious strikes in Kharkiv and a lot of blast and fires, which it's a residential part of Kharkiv, and it's very clear who is hitting civilian targets and trying to inflict pain on the citizens of a big city, the second big city, Kharkiv. And that's once again and again demonstrates the criminality of the regime in Russia. They don't fight a war. They try to kill as much civilians as possible. Simple as that. But on another hand, yes, there is a willingness in Ukraine, and President Zelensky continuously offered to meet and to talk. Some of those talks produced prisoners exchanges in the past in Turkey. There were 2 or 3 rounds of those exchanges already. And Ukraine is cooperative. It shows goodwill. It wants to end the war. It is happy to negotiate, but on another hand, it's also firm that it does not surrender its territory. It wants a deal that is fair, that is in alliance with the international law and the territorial sovereignty and political independence of Ukraine. Obviously, following international rules and norms is what Ukraine wants. And on the opposite, we have exactly the contrasting position in Moscow. They simply deny even to accept a ceasefire, temporary ceasefire, only 30 days. And this was repeatedly suggested by Donald Trump, by Ukrainian president. Russia simply doesn't cooperate even with a simple demand to stop fire for 30 days. What negotiation can happen without ceasefire? I don't understand the Russian positions here. And President Putin can immediately stop the fire. He simply needs a phone call to the generals and to say, stop the fire. We want peace. We haven't seen this for the last 10 and a half months this year. Since Donald Trump is a president, there were repeated demands for ceasefire that Russia denies. And for that matter, diplomacy is paralyzed because of Russia, but also war continues because of Russia. There is no ceasefire. Russia continues to kill civilians. And I'm wondering when the patience of Donald Trump will expire, and then what will follow is a very severe response from Washington, more sanctions on Russia, freezing the assets, using the assets to rebuild Ukraine. Supplying weapons to Ukraine is another measure that needs to happen urgently, including air defense, as to stop civilians being killed in those repeated attacks on the big cities.
Yes, indeed. And how do you think, how is this all affecting, or what do you think, how effective will it be that Russia is not going to be absent in these talks, but Ukraine and Turkey will be holding these talks? Whatever comes out, do you think this will be effective?
Well, we don't know. We will see how effective they will be. Any talks are necessary, even if they don't produce something immediate. Negotiations, exchange of opinions, trying to align positions, making it clear to the media and the public what the positions are, always useful. Again, you are right, Asuma, that we need to see the Russian response to that, because Russia is holding, as I said earlier, the key to the ceasefire and the peace deal. Without Vladimir Putin ordering his troops to stop fire, we won't see any ceasefire. So for that matter, yes, Russia needs to also act. But in order for Russia to act, it needs to be really put into the corner, isolated, no negotiations until they accept reasonable, meaningful conditions for negotiations. So I don't see it's a big problem that Russia is not on the table, exactly because even with Russia on the table, if they don't accept meaningful conditions, there is no point to have Russia on the table. They need to stop fire, simple. And I agree, until Russia doesn't stop fire and continue to kill civilians, what negotiations will? Nothing, no negotiations until Russia stops the fire. That condition should be met first and foremost as a precondition because Russia is the aggressor. Russia started this 4 years ago. Ukraine is defending its territory. Every Ukrainian attack on Russia is defensive,
Yes.
saving
Professor,
people's lives.
Yes. Professor, please stay with us and thank you for sharing that. Now we stay on this, viewers. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry has said that Ukraine tried to attack ATACMS missiles at targets deep inside of Russian territory, with Voronezh as the target. The ministry has also added that Ukraine used 4 ATACMS operational tactical missiles in the attack on Voronezh, but all of them were shot down. Now we welcome back Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, how is this Ukraine's use of long-range ATACMS missiles influencing the strategic calculation of both Russia and Western allies in this conflict? And also, as the war continues to move beyond current boundaries, what are we to make of current situation?
Yes, Ukraine is defending its territory, as I said. ATACMS are very long-range missiles. They are reaching deep into the Russian territory, and they are absolutely crucial here, because unless Russia feels the pain of the attacks on its own territory, it is not going to move anywhere. So obviously, and Ukrainians are targeting only military objects in Russia. These are usually airplanes, airports. These are oil and energy refineries and facilities. We don't see civilians in Russian territory being killed, which is very different from what the Russian strike on Ukraine produced, mostly civilian damage, very minimal military advantage of all those strikes that Russia produced in Ukraine. And on the opposite, every single Ukrainian hit on a Russian territory is bringing military advantage for Ukraine in terms of destroying Russian weapons, Russian airplanes, Russian oil refineries, which are the major export. And in fact, these are also military objects because Russia is exporting oil, and it is where all the money comes into the coffins of Kremlin to continue the war, to buy more weapons and soldiers from North Korea and elsewhere. So yes, these are important hits. Ukraine should continue hitting military targets all over Russian territory. So longer the missiles, better. They should go everywhere in Russia and hit military targets until, as I said earlier, Russia sits on the negotiation table and accept finally a ceasefire. So I regard these hits very important. I'm happy every time when a Russian target is hit and where fire is produced in every oil refinery. That's what we should see more and more of.
Thank you very much, Professor, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. Ukraine is pressuring European allies to approve a $163 billion reparations loan backed by the frozen Russian assets. The request comes as Kyiv faces a major budget shortfall and political fallout from a corruption scandal. European leaders failed to reach a decision last month and will revisit the issue at a December 18 summit. Ukraine's officials say this may be Europe's last chance this year to release the loan, which Russia has warned could trigger a painful response. Meanwhile, allegations of a $100 million kickback scheme in the energy sector have ensnared 2 ministers, putting additional pressure on President Zelensky and his administration. Officials insist the scandal has not halted efforts to secure the loan, though it adds political strain on Kyiv's international partners. Let's listen into what the deputy head of the Office of Ukraine's President, Irina Mudra, has said.
Here that something is put on a hold. Just let's take a reparation loan. Let's take immobilized Russian assets. We 3 years of work. The decision is still not here. So the decision is definitely overdue. this is not because yesterday this scandal happened or 3 years ago something happened, but this additional information, it, as you said, fuels the decisions of political leaders of other countries. So it provides a small impact, but still impact in deciding whether Ukraine should get this reparation loan or not.
Now we welcome back Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jinder Global Law School. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, as we discussed earlier with you on this channel, that Ukraine really needs it, and you also mentioned your views that Russia cannot do much even if the frozen assets are used for Ukraine's benefit. What are the potential and political, also diplomatic consequences for Kyiv if now that corruption scandals have undermined confidence in its ability to manage this large international financial loan or aid that could help Ukraine? And do you think that this will be possible or feasible on the upcoming European decision?
I don't think the European decision will be affected by the corruption investigation in Ukraine. First of all, by the way, this demonstrates how democratic and how transparent is Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't hide under the carpet if somebody is corrupted. It immediately takes action, which is exactly the opposite in Moscow. In Moscow, every single general, every single official is corrupted in that big country, Russia. But we don't see that in the news exactly because it's the dictatorship. And they hide we don't see scandals of corruption in North Korea, in China, Iran, and Russia, because these are dictatorships. Only transparent democracies report corruption. And what Ukraine does is what every single democracy in the world should do. If there is a corruption, it is investigated, it is properly informed to the public. And I see that as a good news for Ukraine, that there are a couple of corrupted former officials, and that they will be sanctions accordingly. That's a good news for Ukraine. That should make Europeans happy and continue to support Ukraine exactly because corrupted officials, which are in every single country in the world, should be exposed and should be sanctioned. I don't see absolutely any problem with the corruption in Ukraine, exactly because this is what needs to be done in your country, in my country, and every other country in the world. Well done, Ukrainians. Expose the corruption and move on and win the war against Russia, against that brutal dictatorship that kills so many civilians. I'm very happy with all this development, NASAMS.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for always joining us and sharing that insight on this news. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. President Donald Trump has said on that broadcasting licenses used by affiliates of Walt Disney's ABC should be taken away, after he disagreed with a question posed by a reporter for the network in the Oval Office. Trump made the comment after a reporter for ABC News asked Trump about the Jeffrey Epstein political scandal during an Oval Office event with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Let's in fact listen into what Trump has said.
It's not the question that I mind, it's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. It's the way you ask these questions. You start off with a man who's highly respected, asking him a horrible, insubordinate, and just a terrible question. And you could even ask that same exact question nicely. You're all psyched, or somebody psychs you over at ABC, they're gonna psych it. You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. And ABC's, your company, your crappy company, is one of the perpetrators. And I'll tell you something,
So why not just sign it down?
I think the license should be taken away from ABC because your news is so fake and it's so wrong. And we have a great commissioner, the chairman, who should look at that, because I think when you come in and when you're 97% negative to Trump, and then Trump wins the election in a landslide, that means obviously your news is not credible, and you're not credible as a reporter. So I've answered your question.
Now we move on. The United States has confirmed the sale of an advanced missile system worth almost $700 million to Taiwan, its second weapons package in a week, bringing the total of $1 billion. The National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System Medium-Range Air Defense Solutions, as they are called, are made by RTX and are a new weapon for Taiwan. In the Indo-Pacific region, only Australia and Indonesia now operate the system. The Pentagon also said the company was given a firm fixed-price contract for procurement of the NASAMS units, with work estimated to be completed in February 2031. Now for this discussion, we welcome Venus Upadhyaya. He's a journalist of the Epoch Times, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to News 6 World. Now looking at this, how might the U.S. sale of advanced missile systems to Taiwan, how do you think this would affect cross-strait relations and regional security dynamics in the Indo-Pacific? And how do you think this will influence the military balance and deterrence posture of Taiwan?
I think the impact is already visible in the Chinese statements that have come out after after the advanced defense missile system was approved by the Trump government to be sold to Taiwan. If you look at these statements, there are two statements that have come out. One has come from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, but more importantly, there is another statement that has come from the State Council Taiwan Affairs. And you look at both the statements, you see, they talk about the separatist elements, they talk about, they remind US about one China principle. They remind US about the three, the agreements which are signed between US and China. But if you look at the statement, which has come from the State Council Taiwan Affairs, it is a very, very strongly worded statement. It, it tells US that it should be prudent. It talks about US not crossing the red line. I will put the red line in quotes. It directly targets the Lai administration. It names the Lai administration. And then it says that the Lai administration is basically threatening the life of the Taiwanese people. So I think all these things are happening as a prelude to 2027. Now, there are various other things that have happened, as you can understand. Recently, we had a very strong-worded spat between the Japanese and the Chinese, as you very well know. Yes. And that has created a lot of tension between their bilateral ties. Yes. And just before that, if you remember, the meeting between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and President Trump in South Korea. And after President Trump comes out of that meeting, he says that Taiwan was not discussed at all. So I think all these things are suggesting that there is something very serious happening in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, in addition to that, if you also look at what's happening at Philippines, this particular year is ending, obviously, has signed a number of defense agreements with multiple countries. But more importantly, Philippines has, it has made changes, removing restrictions to its earlier interaction with Taiwan. And that also has happened this year. So there is obviously something brewing in the Indo-Pacific region. And I would say that if I look particularly at the statement by the spokesperson for State Council Taiwan Affairs, I would say that certainly there is a lot of tension, and certainly there are some warning bells.
Yes, and looking back at China, how might China's potential response to the arms sale, how do you think this would be, and how do you think it would affect US-China diplomatic and economic relations now?
I think if you look at Trump trade and policy, diplomacy with China during this year, a lot of negotiations happening. And if you look at the last meeting, you see that on the rare earths, they had an agreement for 1 year. So obviously, the trade and tariff policy, trade and tariff diplomacy is basically a very open field. It's a very open tug of war. So negotiations are happening on both the sides, and probably these negotiations are basically to bring down the tensions, or to basically find a very non-military response to what could be a military response. We need to see how this reflects in the trade and tariff policies. As of now, since the year is ending, and I think all these administrations would have many other things to finish, as the year ends. But I certainly see, more tensions cropping up in 2026. So probably we are geared up for the new year geopolitics.
Building on your answer, you already kind of touched down on it in my first or second questions, but what do you think, why or what political risk and strategic calculation does the United States face by continuing these high-value arms sales and also the prolonged U.S. defense contracts extending to even 2031? Why do you think this U.S. is doing this towards Taiwan?
To say Taiwan is of a greater strategic interest to US, and Taiwan is of a greater strategic interest to the entire Indo-Pacific region. So it's not only US, but the US allies, and I'm talking about the long-term strategic US allies, including Japan, including Philippines, and also the US partners in the Quad. I think to the world itself, to the entire world, Taiwan is a very important issue. So in case anything drastic happens in the Taiwan Strait, or in case of an invasion that might happen, then not only Taiwan will be impacted, but actually the entire world will be affected. What is time and again, comes up in the messages from the free world, the free and open world. If you look at the statements, that come up continuously and repeatedly. You look at the statements by the Taiwanese leaders, or you look at the statements by the leaders in the Indo-Pacific entire region. They talk about the free and open Indo-Pacific region. So if Taiwan is under threat, that entire concept, the entire meaning of free and open Indo-Pacific region will be under threat.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Ms. Venus Upadhyaya for joining us today and sharing that insight on this news. Now we stay in the region. Japan has lodged a complaint against China over viral social media videos that it says misrepresents a recent high-level diplomatic meeting amid an escalating row between the two nations. China's foreign ministry official Liu Jin-song held a meeting in Beijing with his Japanese counterpart Masaaki Kanai to tame a diplomatic dispute that has been sparked by Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's remarks about Taiwan, where she said that a Chinese attack on Taiwan threatening Japan's survival could trigger a military response from Japan. This comes as a clip that has gone viral on Chinese social media appeared to show Liu speaking with his hands in his pockets to Kanai, who appeared to look differential and apologetic with a bowed head. Let's listen into what the Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary has shared.
中国国内メディアの報道ぶり、その逐一について政府としてコメントすることは差し控えますが、日本側としかるべく調整されない形でプレスアレンジが行われた点、この点については中国側に対ししかるべく申し入れを行いました。昨日の日中アジア局長協議におきましては、中国側からは中国側の立場に基づく発言がありましたが、金井アジア大洋州局長からは反論をし、我が国政府の従来から一貫した立場を説明しました。中国政府による日本への渡航注意等の一連の発表についても申し入れを行いまして、日本国内の治安が決して悪化などしていないこと、これを反論し、改めて中国側が適切な対応を取るよう強く求めたところであります。 また、先般、節権在大阪中国総領事が極めて不適切な発言を行ったことに対し、金井局長から改めて強く抗議をし、早急に適切な対応を取ることを強く求めました。合わせて在留邦人の安全確保についても申し入れを行いました。
That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.